Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, land another commitment in the 2025 class coming from four-star cornerback Bryson Webber from the state of Texas. And I think a lot of the Nebraska fans probably know what I'm going to come up here and lead with, and that is Bryson Webber is just another Matt Rhule kind of guy at the high school level. You look at just the raw physical traits that Bryson Webber brings to this cornerback position. He's 6'2.5", 175 pounds. He certainly has that length. And then you take a look at the track and field metrics, runs a 10.56 in the 100-meter dash. He's one of the fastest cornerback prospects you see in 2025. And what I mean by a Matt Rhule kind of guy is, and Matt Rhule, during not only his first two cycles at Nebraska, but what he's done at Baylor, what he's done at Temple, is give me the undervalued prospects that are elite caliber athletes that have some really elite traits to them from a physical standpoint. Give them to me. We'll make them good football players. Bryson Webber is like the spitting image of what Nebraska wants to fill their roster with from the high school ranks. Going to get into the film, talk about what he brings to this Nebraska defense. Before we do, and as always, just want to say to the Nebraska fans, it's been a blast breaking down these commitments for Nebraska all summer long. And why it's been so fun is Matt Rhule values a lot of guys that really intrigue me at the high school ranks. I can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Bryson Webber. And again, I think it starts with just the physical traits. These kind of guys do not grow on trees at the high school ranks. And you look at the modern era of the Big Ten, there are some elite wide receivers and elite passing attacks that are entering the Big Ten. You talk about Oregon, you talk about USC, you talk about Washington. There are going to be some dynamic difference makers at the wide receiver position that Nebraska is going to see routinely on Saturday afternoons. You need to have the cornerbacks that can deal with some of those elite traits that these wide receivers are going to have. Bryson Webber is one of those guys that certainly can do it. And I think another thing that stands out to me about Bryson Webber is he can do a lot of different things. When you talk about 6'2.5" with the speed that he has, he can play press man coverage. There are not many wide receivers that are going to beat Bryson Webber vertically down the field because of the speed that he has, but most effectively is the length and physicality. I mean, he is 6'2.5" with extremely long arms. He can get hands on opposing wide receivers, jam them at the line of scrimmage, a guy that you can rely on to be a press man corner. But then when you start talking about him playing zone coverage, it's all over the film. Really good in zone as well because he's, one, so fast and can cover so much ground, but he's extremely long. You talk about throwing it, or taking away, I should say, throwing windows for opposing quarterbacks and wide receivers. Having a guy that is almost 6'3" with extremely long arms and twitchy and fast and that can cover a lot of ground, he's a guy that can play effectively in zone coverage because of the amount of space and ground that he can cover in the back end of a defense. I think this is a cornerback that, again, maybe hasn't always put it together at the high school ranks yet, but you take a look at what he could be year 2, year 3, year 4 within this Nebraska program. You're looking at another all Big Ten caliber player. That's how Nebraska wants to build this roster under Matt Rhule. You get into the film, and again, it's a very fun, I should say, film study to watch because there's a lot to like in terms of what Bryson Webber brings to the table. One, I mean, you see the ability to just carry and cover so much ground. You see this throwing window for the quarterback. Bryson Webber just takes it away just so routinely. I mean, this is a glider when it comes to kind of taking away throwing windows, making plays on the football. A guy that can bait a lot of quarterbacks, a guy that can operate press man, but also come up and make plays. I mean, you talk about a guy that is 6'2", 180 pounds at the cornerback spot. He can tackle in space. He's actually very willing to come downhill and make tackles on the perimeter, which is a lot of times when you're talking about these elite caliber athlete cornerbacks, you don't always see on the high school film. Bryson Webber, he's got it all over the film in terms of coming back and down and making plays. Another example of kind of sitting there in zone coverage and just taking away throwing windows. When you look at this throwing window, if you're a quarterback, you're saying, hey, this is going to be a completion. Bryson Webber, the closing speed that he has, meeting the football and the ball carrier, separating the football and the wide receiver, that's exactly what you want to look in terms of closing in on throwing windows, having that breaking speed, and then again, coming downhill, making plays. This is a guy that wants to get involved in the run game. You're not going to play for Nebraska in that defensive back room if you can't come up and make tackles. Bryson Webber can do that. continue to work through it. And again, it's just really, really impressive reps. And you can kind of see why Nebraska's betting on this kid. Look, taking away the throwing window once again. And I think that ends up being a completion. You see a hustle play, but I think this just gives you the ability to see, I mean, like the amount of space that Bryson Webber can kind of create and kind of take up when he's playing that zone coverage. And again, that's just a really good throw by the quarterback. You love to see Bryson Webber kind of have that hustle play, go make the play. I think lastly, and this is a guy that you just can't beat vertically. You can play press man, only have a single high safety right here because you know Bryson Webber can effortlessly run with wide receivers down the field, squeeze into the line of scrimmage, just no throwing window. That is textbook stuff from Bryson Webber. And if you continue to develop an athlete like Bryson Webber with the physical traits that he brings to this Nebraska defense, the sky's the limit for this kid. You take a look at Nebraska in 2025, and I think you just want to start with it is full with just physically gifted individuals. Again, maybe not necessarily the best football players yet, but they can be excellent football players once they get into this Nebraska program. And I think the last thing I want to shout out is John Butler taking over. Obviously, I think this is his first week within this Nebraska coaching staff. Evan Cooper was the guy that was carrying this commitment with Bryson Webber. Obviously, we have the news that Evan Cooper no longer with this Nebraska team. And I think Bryson Webber, I think a lot of Nebraska fans were excited to see him commit to Nebraska. He obviously backs off the commitment or backs off his commitment date. And you see Nebraska kind of just continue to maintain the relationship with Bryson Webber. John Butler coming in probably gets on the phone with Bryson Webber and convinces him that Nebraska is still his spot. And I think when you have a coach like John Butler, who has been in so many different NFL rooms, you can sell that to these kids on the recruiting trail. What is one of the things that matters the most to these kids coming out of high school? Can I get developed to be an NFL football player? Yeah, you can talk about NIL all you want. A lot of these kids want to make sure they are getting developed and going to the NFL. Having a defensive backs coach in John Butler who has cut his teeth at the NFL level can sell, hey, I know what it takes. I know what it looks like at the NFL level. Come play for me. I'm going to get you NFL ready. I think you're seeing John Butler show a little bit of juice on the recruiting trail. We'll close it there. Another Matt Rhule kind of guy, big time upside with Bryson Webber. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, again, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.